We can mention the fact that y'all brought along your lovely wives to have a conversation today, and my wife just dropped me off a sandwich, which has me feeling a little bit insecure in my feminism.
Looks like a pretty good sandwich, though. So,
she crushed this grilled cheese. It's amazing. It's delicious. I'm so thrilled. And it's the second meal she's made for me today. So I'm feeling very, very lucky to be married to the wonderful woman I am. She just doesn't happen to be into true crime. So
hashtag blessed.
We're going to figure out why the girls love true crime very strongly, folks.
This is Normal Men, a podcast from four men who are clinging desperately to normalcy in an era when that's asking a bit too much. I'm George in Charlotte.
In D.C., I'm Proctor Malone.
In outer Florida, I'm low-tax Speedrun-Enjoyer.
And I'm Ed in Boston.
As George said, I and low-tax are joined today. We are joined today by our wives, who are both true crime aficionados and who have some other similarities that we'll discuss over the course of this podcast that may help explain that, in an attempt to understand why women generally and our wives specifically are into lovingly detailed recreations of murder. So...
And I think this is going to be a nice companion episode to the episode we did with Lucy, my friend Lucy, who sort of walked us through the appeal of Taylor Swift, because no one on our podcast has a particular interest in Taylor Swift, but there was a lot to sink your teeth into there, I think. Dee, do you disagree? Does your husband have a particular interest in Taylor Swift?
Oh, he listens to way more Taylor Swift than I have ever listened to in my entire life. So I feel like he was jamming on that episode. Very happy.
I feel like this is going to devolve into Proctor and my wives just roasting the hell out of us at some point here. And I'm not opposed to that, to be clear.
We all knew what we signed up for here.
Yeah. In any event, this is a sort of a companion episode where we, as normal men, are trying to push other normal men into understanding a little bit about what our opposite numbers are into. And if you happen to be one of those opposite numbers who listen to this podcast, then hopefully you'll enjoy the conversation that we're about to have on a subject you're interested in. And for everybody else who isn't super into true crime, you're going to learn something. So here we are. I'm excited for it. I hope y'all are too.
So please welcome Dee, who is my wife, to the podcast.
Hello.
And Jay, who is Low-Tax's wife.
Hello.
So I guess to start off with, true crime. What is true crime? What are we talking about when we talk about true crime? Dee, do you have a definition here?
I mean, do I need to go into what crime is, or are we all good on that? We're all good on that?
I think we're good on the concept of crime,
Okay. I mean, I think it's retelling of, the worst parts of the human element. And sometimes some stories that, give you a little hope about what people can overcome. But that's kind of what I think about it. It's like, the boogeyman stories, but the boogeymen are actually men. For the most part, anyway.
There is a real gender skew on the perpetrators, right? Like these are not exclusively, but primarily stories about men killing women.
Sometimes other men, but yes, 100%.
And that just reflects the actual crime statistics, right? I mean, there just aren't that many female murderers. They did exist, but rare.
Right.
Yeah, that's why they're all referred to, like three of them are all referred to as the Black Widow, right? There's like three of those, and those are all the female murderers, and all of the other ones are the guys.
Yeah, I think that's the same naming convention they use for darts players, actually. So, all right. Well, let's take a step back here. We have in our notes the most important question to ask, which is, was Adnan guilty?
Maybe we should explain who Adnan was.
So, one of kind of the mother texts for modern true crime podcasts.
I love there's no hesitation about who was going to answer that question.
Is a podcast called Serial. Sarah Koenig is the host and creator of Serial, that explored in its first season one particular murder in, I believe it was the Maryland suburbs of DC.
Yeah. It was around Baltimore.
Baltimore, okay. Of a young woman for whom a man named Adnan Syed had been incarcerated. He's now out of jail and has been arguably exonerated. I'm not sure what the status of him getting out of jail was. I just know that he's no longer in jail.
I think last I heard, the prosecution, the state attorney's office had dropped the case and advocated that he leave jail. And then the courts intervened to say, no, not so much. And I think that's where it left off.
He's still, he got credit for time served. So I think he is out, but he's probationary, I think, for about 5 years right now.
So not necessarily exonerated, but currently a free man on probation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely not exonerated.
Yeah.
So did he do it?
The evidence is shaky at best, I would say. A lot of it circumstantial, a lot of it using, this was in 98 or so, I want to say, like the late 90s when cell phones were just starting to get big and, the whole triangulating where people were is something that was just becoming, readily available and used. And I think that it was not necessarily the best work. They found somebody who they thought was guilty and they were like, yeah, we can make it work.
I listened to Serial with Dee many years ago. And part of the appeal of that, at least what seemed to be part of the appeal of that, was stepping into a moment in time, kind of stepping into a set of lives that had been reconstructed by the podcast. That, you had all of this detail about this web of social relationships, about who people were at this time and what they meant to each other. And it seemed to me at the time that richness of detail, that degree of texture, was a big part of the appeal. Is that fair to say that this is kind of a psychodrama sort of thing? Or what about it? Does this work for you as a police procedural? Does this work for you because of the characters? What about true crime appeals to you?
I guess for me, I grew up with a father in law enforcement. And so, specifically as a homicide detective in a large city. And I think that probably colored some of my intrigue into it because it was something that I was exposed to. Like, my parents were watching Law and Order and, I would watch that with them. But also when my dad's friends would come over, most of them were cops and they would be talking about different crimes and things that had happened. And so I think that, my exposure might be different than somebody who didn't have that type of exposure growing up. But I think that it's going to sound disgusting, but it feels like homey listening to a crime thing for me, just because it reminds me of those times of sitting around and listening to, the cops talk about their glory days and things like that. And in a good way. My dad was a good cop. He wasn't what we got going on right now.
Do you get the same sort of vibes from watching The Wire? Like, there's that one episode of The Wire where they do the wake for the cop at an Irish bar in Baltimore. And I could imagine that being a kind of similar trigger.
I watched one episode of The Wire and said, absolutely not. I will never watch this show. It was that first episode was so emotionally taxing on me that I crossed it off my list. So
too real.
Yeah, it was too real. I did not. Maybe I'll go back to it 20 years later, but.
Yeah, fair enough. That's very true of The Wire. Jay, what about you? What is it? The psychodrama? Is it the puzzle? What's the specific appeal of true crime for you?
I don't know. I had a slightly different relationship. My father was also a police officer. He passed away when I was 13, and he never really discussed his work with us. So it wasn't until his wake and getting to learn who his friends were that I got to hear all the different stories. And I don't know, there's something fascinating about it. It is the puzzle. It is psychoanalyzing the motives and trying to figure out what makes people tick. And I think there's also a form of self-preservation. Okay, I'm not going to be in this situation. I'm not going to put myself in this situation anymore. And I think it provides a lot of good safety tips for women too. It's all of that is just, it's intriguing. It's fascinating. And a lot of the times you have a really good narrator and their voice is just soothing.
And we all know exactly which guy we're thinking of here. Right?
Oh, Keith Morrison. Right.
He could narrate anything, and I'd be like, yes, I will listen to you. You can read the dictionary. Let's go. I'll learn some new words.
Are we talking David Attenborough level or superior?
Oh, yeah. So, D, you could say I could read the dictionary, but why?
Yeah, exactly. So keep going.
So what are some of your favorite true crime podcasts, Jay? Is that Morrison is the universe?
For a while there, it was MFM, so My Favorite Murder. I got into them. And then lately, I have really loved Morbid. I think they do a fantastic job of explaining the story, but also giving justice and acknowledgement to the victim and not just solely focusing on the perpetrator. They're just a fantastic advocate for the victims of these crimes, and they're just wonderful together.
I totally agree. My Favorite Murder is more of a comedy, I would say, whereas Morbid really does get into the victims a lot. Like, they give a lot of background story. I really enjoy them. Crime Junkie is also a great one, and they have a couple of spin-offs from there. There's also a series called Buried Bones, which is it takes place with mostly like historical crimes, and it has a historical writer and then forensic guy on there, and they sort of try to unpack what happened in those, crimes from the 18th century.
I enjoy the historical ones too, and it's not always, but it's often we'll watch Jack the Ripper ones when we're in bed and stuff, and like it's 2026. They're not going to figure out who Jack the Ripper is at this point. That ship, I think, has kind of sailed. But I love those like 18th, 19th century ones.
I mean, you never know. We maybe just figured out who Zodiac was the other week, right?
Well, no, we knew who Zodiac was.
Yeah, Ted Cruz.
10 years ago. It was Ted Cruz, right.
All the puzzle pieces fit together.
Is there something that distinguishes the true crime aspect specifically, as in like Adnan Syed was like a real person, right? His victim is a real person. His victim was a real person, whereas Law and Order or NCIS or whatever fictional property, any of the procedurals, whatever, they're not real. They're not real people. So is that specific reality of it a draw as well? Is there some aspect of that you find more compelling than scripted, which obviously with scripted, you can do more fun stuff because you're not bound by reality?
I mean, I think, scripted gives me the same vibes as like a script, like The Pit, where it's something that is, I enjoy the story of it and understand that it's not, that it's storytelling in a different way. But it is intriguing listening to the ones where, everybody was a real person, because you can put yourself in sort of like the mindset of how did that happen? Like, what drove somebody to do that? Or, the victim, did they see this coming? And they just were like, shit, I don't know how to get out of this. I don't know what the right thing to do is. And is there a right thing to do? At least that's
No, I would agree with that.
So some of it is being able to kind of put yourself in the shoes of the victim in particular, or
I think a little bit of both. Like the victim, and also like what broke in this person to make them kill somebody. You have the ones where it's obvious, like somebody just actually snapped and just regrets what they did, or did it, when they were irrational. But then you have the ones that are like planning and, buying chemicals to dissolve a body in their bathtub. And you're like, whoa, there's something else going on here. And so I think the psychology behind that is really interesting.
There's probably a barrier, right? Like those sorts of stories have been told on Law and Order and various other shows. But it's a bit of a different beast to go from this television show where they're dissolving a body in acid or something to, oh my God, somebody actually did that.
Yeah, and I think the stories kind of taint it. Like I work with animals, and so part of my job with our boarding facility is I have to buy copious amounts of cat litter, and I'm always checking out going, I'm really not trying to cover the smell of a body. It's just a thought that enters my head every time I check out.
There's also this interaction between entertainment and reality. Like the Adnan Syed case is an interesting version of that, or the Menendez brothers getting resentenced as a result of interest in the 1989 murder case that they were involved in, where the audience being engaged in the story actually feeds back into the story itself at a lag and at a remove, but nonetheless, it's a two-way participation thing in a certain sense. Whereas when you're watching Law and Order, I mean, you're not affecting the case at all, right? It can't be. I mean, I have to imagine that a lot of people that listen to this stuff kind of imagine themselves from time to time being like, well, what if I could figure out the thing that, I'll listen to this podcast and I'll be the one that makes the connection that blows the whole thing wide open. Kind of like, when you buy a lottery ticket, you imagine what you would spend the money on. Kind of the same deal. I know, like, I buy lottery tickets occasionally just so I can get some time thinking about what I would spend the money on. Like that's the entertainment value. Like the actual NPV of the ticket doesn't matter. It's I spent $10 to like think for an hour about what I would do with the money. I could totally see true crime working similarly for folks where it's not just, oh, I'm hearing the story. It's also like I'm thinking the story back and like imagining myself solving it. And that's a worthwhile exercise on top of the passive, just listening to a podcast the way I would listen to a soccer podcast or whatever. Do y'all get that vibe at all when you listen to it, or are you or listen or read or watch or whatever in the genre, or is that wildly off base?
I don't think I'm going to solve any of these things. So I'm just listening to this story. For me, sometimes it's like background.
Absolutely.
It's something that I have on and it's just there and I can zone in and out as I wish. But I definitely don't fancy myself a Sherlock Holmes that is going to solve this mystery that is out there. I am hoping that they tell me who did it in the end of the podcast.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask you, Dee. Like, do you tend to gravitate towards the storytelling of cases that have been solved? Like, do you find a frustration with like unsolved cases, unsolved shows where you're just, you end it and you're like, oh, there's no finality to this. Like, this is so frustrating because I have a problem with the not solved issues and I avoid them.
I prefer to know. I would like that closure there. I recently started listening into as much as, and I've requested some books from the library, so we'll see when they get here, about the Dyatlov Pass incident. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. So it took place in Russia in like the 70s, and it was a bunch of experienced hikers that were out on like a 2-week journey that they were going to try to get some sort of like mountaineering certification. So like they were not like me, who does not go in the outdoors, out there doing this. Like they knew what they were doing. And they made it like a week into their journey, and then they didn't show up at their endpoint. And so they started sending people out, and they found that their tent had been like cut open from the inside, and they found, I want to say it was 9 different people were on this journey, and they found them in different groups in different states of like trauma to their bodies. Like one of them had basically her internal organs were like she got hit by a car, but there was no external trauma to her body that you would see in something like that. And others clearly like died of frostbite, and there was one who they think just died of hypothermia, and others who had like massive abrasions to their face, and trying to figure out like how did they get half a mile away from one another. And it was clear that they like exited the tent and then tried to start a fire and were able to get the fire going, but then had to put the fire out for some reason. And so it's sort of like conspiratorial, like, was this, part of the Russian government doing something? Did aliens have to do with this? There's also a native tribe there, native people, and, figuring out, okay, well, did they get angry at these hikers for being there? But they were like helping with the investigation. And so it's just a really interesting, like, what happened to this group of people. Highly recommend. There are lots of, in fact, one of the first episodes of Morbid was actually about it, but that was when they sounded like underwater and not as great as they are now. But there are a lot of other podcasts that have devoted things to it. It's just really interesting because you like hear about all of these different things that happened to these people, and you're like, how the hell did that happen? Like, what took place? Did one of them go crazy, or is it something else?
So there's a bunch of them who have just internal injuries. Mm-hmm. Like you said, they seem like they got hit by a car. And then there's other people with like facial lacerations and like external injuries.
Yes, like missing a tongue or like burnt by the fire. Like, did they get too close to the fire? And then they have like singed things, and they're dressed in very minimal clothing, but it's trying to figure out, okay, was there some sort of avalanche, which is a leading theory that has basically been debunked, but that's what the Russian government is going with. Was there some sort of avalanche that, forced them out of their tent, and then as people started to get hypothermia and die, they were peeling clothes off of them and putting them on themselves, and it's really interesting.
So that's Unsolved, obviously. So they're the kind of whodunit, what happened here, the forensics of it are part of the deal.
Yeah.
But that's going to be less of a psychological thing because you have fewer surviving profiles, right? Like, you're not necessarily going to be talking through the web of relationships in the same way as you would for one of these, I never thought it could happen in our small town murders.
Right.
So that seems like kind of a different avenue of appeal, potentially, that if you're looking kind of more at hard forensic evidence. Do you like knowing who did it at the outset of a true crime story, or is that a reveal that should be saved for the end?
For me, I'm impatient. I know when I start watching certain episodes of any kind of show I'm watching, or even a podcast, I'd go to Google and I'm like, who did this? Because I just get frustrated and I like closure.
I go back and forth. It's fun sometimes to know and then figure out how that person broke in a certain way to go after this.
And sometimes I just really want to cut to the chase to find out if I'm right.
Yeah. It's that knowing.
Uh-huh.
Something we should note here is that impatience may have something to do with the fact that she falls asleep within 5 minutes of turning on Dateline. And yeah.
Absolutely.
It's important to get a good summary.
We all have our little rituals.
You get Keith Morrison in there and it's easy just to go out.
Dee is so firmly anti-spoiler that when we watched Game of Thrones, the red wedding scene, right at the start of the red wedding scene, there's this moment where Catelyn Stark, the Stark mother, touches the wrist of Lord Bolton, who is one of the people who is about to murder everybody in the room. And Diana looks at me and says, "Oh, is this kind of a romantic situation here?" And that's not how that episode proceeds. So
Proctor just looked at me and was like, "Oh, you're in for some serious disappointment."
That scene is, I think, one of the most disturbing scenes I've ever watched on TV, and I can't really point to why. Like, there's something about it psychologically that just completely broke my brain, and I have only watched it once, and I'll never watch it again. Like, if I ever do a Game of Thrones rewatch, I'm just gonna skip it. I don't know why it was so bad, but I think that's one of the reasons I struggle to get into the true crime thing, is because there is so much bad stuff in the headlines that hearing more bad stuff is just not what I want to spend my leisure time on. Like, I want to spend my leisure time on, like, learning about silly men kicking a silly ball around a silly field. Mm-hmm. Does that, like, how does that impact y'all's experience of it? Because obviously, if you're spending a lot of time and your leisure on it, that doesn't bother you as much, like, for whatever reason. What about it? Like, how do you listen to some of this bad stuff that happens to these people? And, you know, it's fine. It's just entertainment.
I mean, I try to tune out a lot of the stuff that's happening now as much as I can, being married to who I am married to.
Good luck.
Trust me. He'll be like, have you seen the news? And I'm like, no, I haven't.
No.
So I think that I try, like, I know that it has happened to real people, and I know that the things that I'm listening to or reading about are absolutely horrific, but there is, like, a difference in it's not happening now. And so I can, like, disassociate from it, I guess, in that way. I don't have to live through the horror of it unfolding before my eyes.
I would agree with that. I think that was a very eloquent way to put it.
It would be kind of nice to know the ending of some of the stuff we're living through right now, you know, assuming it's not horrible.
No.
I don't think,
I don't think that's going to go the way you want it to. We live in DC.
I mean, all of these cases are, for the most part, very old, right? You know, they're
well, the murder rate has fallen a lot. So
yeah, it has.
You're running out of source material.
They're 20, 30, 40 years old. I mean, most of the shows seem to focus on, you know, the golden age, quote unquote, of serial killers. You know, the 70s and up to the mid 80s or so.
It was real bad. Yeah, that was like, I mean, now I'm sure as many still exist. They're just better at hiding their tracks.
Do as many still exist? Is that like a widely held, or is it actually false? I mean, I'm a pretty strong believer in the whole lead in the air thing from gasoline.
With the whole, how all of this, a whole bunch of serial killers were, like, formed in the same geographic area.
Well, geographic and temporally, right? Like you saw, like, a surge that maps well, and surge in the overall murder rate, but serial killers seem especially well correlated to it, where when there was a lot of gasoline in the air from leaded gasoline, there were a lot more serial killers. And now that you've seen that unleaded gas become the standard, there just are far fewer serial killers. It's far fewer murderers too, but it's both. Yeah.
They don't all form in the same place though, right? Like, it's Chicago, it's Los Angeles, I guess you have the Green River Killer in Seattle, but it seems like Southern California and the Midwest around Los Angeles are two really big ones.
The gang remembers some serial killers.
There was an article that Proctor sent to like a group text that we have.
It's the Asarco copper smelter near Tacoma.
Yeah.
That a shockingly large number of the kind of notorious serial killers, I don't have this off the top of my head, I'm referring to something here, but Ted Bundy, Gary Ridgway, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and Charlie Manson had spent 10 years at a nearby prison to the Asarco smoker. That, you know, there's some thought that there is something specific to what's happening at these copper smelters that might be driving some amount of this, independent from the leaded gas thing. These smelters are putting a bunch of fairly nasty heavy metals into the air and water. So there might be a localized effect in addition to the the overall.
But they're smelters elsewhere, right? I mean, like, is it that it's mixing with the salmon, or what? Like, what are we doing here?
Well, I mean, I think the thought is that for whatever reason, the Tacoma one is closer to population centers than a lot of the other Esarco smelters are.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know. I'd have to sit down with a map and figure out where the other biggest Esarco smelters have been. I want to say that there's one in Arizona that's not terribly near anything. Anyway, there are several of these. There might also be different properties of whatever the feedstock for that smelter was, because that does tend to be regionalized.
Dee might be able to help me say this the correct way, but I know that, I mean, that's a fascinating theory, but I know that there's a lot of other theories too about childhood brain trauma and it affecting a certain portion of the brain. And a lot of these people who end up committing these crimes, especially your serial killers, all tend to have these incidences that happen to a certain portion of their brain. And it's a commonality that you start to see.
Yeah, as you start looking back at their history, it seems like, they fell off a horse or fell out of a tree, or, even the ones who did not have like horrific abuse occur to them when they were growing up, they had some sort of injury that may have caused, a concussion or something else.
It's the frontal lobe, right? That's the section that controls, that's impulse control and all that.
Prefrontal cortex, maybe?
Prefrontal cortex, maybe, is what I'm thinking of. As you can all tell, I'm a brain surgeon.
Yep.
But going back to, if there are more serial killers now or not, I think there's still a lot of serial killers out there, and they're just perhaps hunting in a different way,
Isn't there one supposed to be suspected in Texas right now?
Yes, because they just started finding all of these bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I want to say it was like, were they finding them in a river?
I think so. I haven't honestly, I haven't followed it. I just know that there's a suspected serial killer in Texas right now because they're finding a lot of commonalities in the MO and the location of where they're finding the bodies.
Yeah, that is. I just saw the headlines of it, but I didn't get deep in it yet.
Yeah, me either.
But with being able to find people on the internet and finding people who will be considered less dead to others who maybe don't have family and maybe are in sex work or something along those lines, who are not necessarily going to have somebody looking after them or realizing that they shouldn't have disappeared. I think it's still real easy to find people to murder if you want to find them.
Yep.
And there's definitely space for the overall murder rate to have come down significantly and for serial killing to still have gone up. That serial killers are not, at least my understanding is that they're not a significant driver of the overall murder rate. That this is a very small fraction of total homicides.
You'd expect there to be both correlations, positive and negative, right? Like, because the numbers of serial killers are so low, like just in the scope of the whole population, whatever's driving that could be completely independent of the overall murder rate. And also you'd expect that if like a lot of humans are willing to kill each other over anything, then you would see more people who are the more extreme version of that are serial killers. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, you could definitely see it go both ways, in part just because the numbers are so low, right?
Right. And, there's some thought that some of this stuff is mediagenic also, which is to say that, that people get exposed to stories about homicide, people get exposed to stories about serial killing, and that becomes inspiration for some small fraction of people. Certainly not you, true crime listeners, but other people. Yeah. To go forth and commit atrocities themselves.
Well, it's the people who are seeking fame, and that is one way to get fame and notoriety. If you don't feel like you're going to become, the next Beyonce up on stage, you're like, oh, this is a way to get a following and get some creepy letters to myself in jail.
Mindhunter is inspiring an entire generation full of serial killers, is what you're saying?
Yes, basically.
Yeah, okay.
It's really a guidebook.
Jonathan Groff has much to answer for.
There's a reason why there's not a second season.
Great show, by the way. I really enjoyed that show. It was very well made.
Fantastic show.
So good.
Yeah.
So good.
Always a sucker for a procedural about bureaucracy.
But Dee, do you find there's like a science component too? Like, are you at all fascinated about them being able to, like the Golden State Killer, like being able to use genealogy in order to like solve these decades old cases? Like that to me is just fascinating. Just see improvements and innovation of science.
Yeah. And actually the co-host of Barry Bones is the lead detective who solved the Golden State Killer. I just can't remember his name right now. But yes, it is. I absolutely find it so intriguing because, you know, these unsolved cases, and think about all of the backlog that we have with so many DNA samples out there and things. And with, you know, genealogy, we could really be solving and helping, you know, a lot of families who don't have that closure that we get when we're done listening to a podcast episode, have that closure for, you know, their loved ones. I think it's so interesting.
Yeah, no, I absolutely find it fascinating. It's really cool.
Golden State was the guy they got like 2 or 3 years ago, was it? They had been hunting him for decades, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
and they finally nailed it down a couple of years ago.
The investigator in that case, in a significant boost to our longstanding theory of nominative determinism, is named Paul Holes.
Yes, that's his name, Paul Holes.
Jail. No trial.
Jay, is there any like genre, I guess, of killers that you're most interested in, or that like if you're like, ooh, like?
No, I'm not. I don't gravitate to any specific kind. Honestly, if it's just a decent enough story and it's interesting and there's little science to it, I'm in. What about you?
I prefer the ones that do not have like a lot of child death in them and or abuse. If I see that in the headline, I'm like, maybe I don't want to, you know, read this one or listen to this one. But other than that, the variety is great.
So, all right. So one of the ones, I know Netflix did this, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was the Family Annihilator. Watts.
Oh, yes. They've done so many on him.
Yes. So is that something that if you read the headline or the summary of it, is that something that you would tend to stay away from?
I think if it was
into a different category altogether.
I think that falls into a different category because it's like the Family Annihilator category, I think is different than like a hunting and like plucking a child off of a playground category.
Yeah. Okay. I would agree.
Jay, you said something earlier that I thought was interesting, that you take actual sort of tips or ways to keep yourself safer from these stories. Can you give a couple examples of what sort of stuff you've taken away as like a way to avoid being put in danger?
I mean, I don't know if these are like good tips or if these are just these impulsive thoughts that you have that you should just immediately shut down. But I know, like, I love to go hiking with my dogs, and every once in a while we'll do a hike and it's in a remote area and you're surrounded by woods, and there's this immediate voice in my head that is just like, am I going to find a body? It's one question I ask myself. And number two is, this would be a really great place to kill me because nobody could hear me. And so it's definitely, you know, to the same side of a coin. It's just, I said that wrong. I get nervous, but also at the same time, I'm doing a lot of things to protect myself. You know, I have the really loud whistle that I carry with me everywhere that I go. I have my, every once in a while, I do have pepper spray. Low tax, I have pepper spray. So there's just certain things that you learn. Like, you know, obviously I don't like going out to places at night. I definitely take consideration of who I who is around me when I am out. Because you find yourself in these everyday situations that for some people ended their life. And so you have to be careful, and maybe you overcompensate, or maybe you overthink, and maybe in some situations I do let my arm down and not hurt my purse, or, hold on to my purse very tight, because I don't want to make the other person think that I think they're going to steal it. And it's just this balancing act that I have to do, and it's exhausting. And I don't know. Do you ever feel like you do anything like that?
Oh, 100%. It's like when I go out, to walk the dog, I frequently have on a true crime podcast, but I will only have in one earbud, because I'm like, I need to be able to hear what's actually happening. And I'm aware of like what's around me. If I go into, a store or even like a movie theater or something, I know where the closest exit is. Like, I want to be able to have at least a fighting chance. I mean, I'm not a very large person. I'm only 5'2", so like, I know that I'm not going to have, be able to go up against a 6-foot guy, but at least I want to make it hard,
Right.
Like walking with keys spread out in between my fingers.
Yep.
Just as a precautionary thing.
Do you think this is maybe part of the reason why there's a gender gap on true crime? We haven't really talked about that directly, but there's a tremendous gender gap in true crime as a genre. Women are the primary consumers of true crime, and for whatever reason, it doesn't have nearly the same appeal to men. Is it because it is flipping you through threat scenarios? Is it because it gives you a feeling of control that you've considered these from, these cautionary tales?
Maybe. I mean, go, Jay.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, to a degree. Yeah. I mean, it's a better way to protect yourself and to, again, notice your surroundings. And I know that there is a gender gap. I know that guys can go out and go for a run at night and not have to worry about, this person's kind of behind me, and it just seems kind of odd. And it's very different.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that gender gap, it translates into who the majority of the victims are. Women are most likely to be killed by their partner in general. And so I think, it is something that is probably more at the front of our brains than it is for you all, just in a general thing. I have no fear that Proctor is going to kill me, but
they are in separate rooms, for the record.
That's just true.
I was going to say they're probably more likely to kill us, and Proctor and I probably wouldn't blame them much for it at this point.
I certainly wouldn't.
We'd certainly be much better at it given all the true crime we listen to.
Yeah, right. If it's going to happen, I'm drawing dead here.
This is a conversation that Raquel and I have all the time. Not all the time, but we've had a number of times, right? Like, I am 6'3", 227-pound former college football player. I have been in maybe off of a football field, like 3 situations in my life where I felt any physical fear, like any justified, lizard brain saying, get out of here, or there's some sort of physical violence that's actually, I can tell, is a real problem for me. Like, even a guy stopping, there was a road rage incident a couple months ago where a guy got out of his truck and parked his truck in front of mine, came up to me and was like yelling at me. And I'm like, well, he doesn't have a gun, so like, this is fine. Like, I just am not, there's never a, whereas for, I don't want to say all, but virtually all the female population, very much the opposite, right? Where like, there are a huge number of situations where you have justified fear of something going south. Not that every day there's some angry man coming up to you and physically threatening you, but it's the threshold for a situation spiraling out of control to the point where you're in real trouble is much, 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 much lower. So when I talk with my wife about her security concerns, which, everybody has in the society we have that is, almost everybody has in the society we have that's so violent and so threatening in so many contexts, it's I always have to modulate like, okay, I need to put myself in her shoes, right? And I also want to make sure that I'm trying to be like rational and trying to be, not playing into fear as opposed to, validating it and making sure that it's accounted for, right? It's a hard line to walk, but I definitely think there's something to the fact that like men in general and a certain kind of man specifically just really has to get outside of themselves to understand the perspective of a person who is under physical threat a lot more often than we are, like almost every day. Not from their partners in this case.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. even if you are not 6'4", 227 or whatever George said he was, just being a guy, you're under less threat, right? There's not like a ton of roving women around on the street who are going to like tackle you and stab you or something like that, or try to sexually assault you. Whereas that can be a very real concern for women. It's just even separating the physical differences on average that you'll have between men and women, you're still it's a very different sort of cultural interface, I would think.
Men face far less escalation dominance, right? Like just by any conflict between men is the outcome of escalation dominance is very different from a conflict between a man and a woman where escalation dominance, where the man is just one up. Like it goes to very different places because of that fundamental physical mismatch. And yeah, I mean, that's a very real thing.
And I mean, physical, but also psychological mismatch, it is, we have the fucking bitch, that has come up, unfortunately this week, where it is just that innate, like, well, she deserved it because of X. And that doesn't necessarily happen when it's male on male. Like, he didn't deserve it because he was a man. She deserved it because she was a woman and she was exerting some sort of power or just existing in a space and challenging, authority or challenge and authority of just a man. They don't actually have to be in any, they don't have to have any status of authority over the woman.
Yeah.
Just that idea that, man of the household, and that's what I'm telling you to do.
Refusal to submit to hierarchy is a threat to hierarchy, whereas conflicts between hierarchies are not an inherent threat to either of those hierarchies.
Beautifully said.
Or even it doesn't get to a refusal to submit. It can just be, y'all were giggling around us, right? We're, Proctor, George, and I, and D and J, y'all may remember too, the Gen Z boss in a mini video from TikTok.
We talked about that at length on a prior episode, and mind-blowing stuff.
And how it drove a ton of men, especially on Twitter, just completely over the edge. And it was just these women in Australia having fun at the office and, joking around. And it drove these guys completely over the edge. It doesn't even have to be challenging some patriarchal overarching system. It can just be having a good time and being yourself.
But I think that's it, right? Like the having a good time and being yourself is the inherent challenge to the system, right? Because it's orienting.
Yes.
Yeah, it's orienting the subject and object away from men, right? Like that video was not for men, and the fact it wasn't for men was the whole problem for the men in question. Like,
right.
Yeah.
That was a video by women for women.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I, for the record, did not find it funny at all. It did not tickle my funny bone. But who cares? Like, it's not for me. Move on. Which,
I was watching and I was kind of like, all right, well, whatever.
Yeah.
Have fun at work. Do your thing.
I feel like we're kind of talking around the Margaret Atwood quote that men are afraid that women will laugh at them. Women are afraid that men will kill them here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, that underwrites a lot of this stuff, and maybe a lot of the disparity. I think it's interesting to me particularly that there's this gender split on true crime that, from what you guys have said, is not entirely explicable by identifying with the victims. That some of this, like, is this to any degree kind of like a power fantasy that you're looking at the true crime and thinking, I could do that. That you have access to the tools, that you could be a killer also. Is that part of the appeal? In dangerous territory, asking my wife this.
I don't know if I would say that's part of the appeal for me, but the thought of, could I do that? Like, would I be able to, like, could I poison someone? Yeah, sure. That seems easy peasy, but could I actually, like, stab someone? Or, all right, I'm not poisoning him. I'm just saying that's like,
like I said, man, I'm drawing dead here.
But when you think about traditionally the manners in which women kill other people, poison is what most people expect, because it is the least hands-on way.
It's a trope that goes back like 2,500 odd years, at least 2,000 years to, antiquity. Huge trope in Roman history that the conniving woman was poisoning somebody.
And suggestively, there's a big correlation in there was a big drop in poisoning deaths in various states associated with the timing of their adoption of no-fault divorce.
Ding, ding, ding.
So,
yeah. Go figure. But I think part of it is, could I do that? Like, if there was a situation where, my children's lives were in danger, could I kill somebody who was endangering them? And like, how...
That's a different scenario.
Well, yeah. I'm just coming up with yes, that is a different scenario. And yes, I could. Not by poison. Too slow if they're in danger.
Yep.
But I don't know if it's I wouldn't say it's like a fantasy in that way. Like putting myself in the, like, perpetrators, the killers mindset. For me.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine it would be a fantasy so much as just trying to imagine, like you said, could I do that? Like, what am I as a human with my moral compass? What am I capable of? And I'm, of course, not capable of that, but how does someone get to that point, right?
Yeah, totally.
And maybe there's some cautionary action there too, that you're charting the process of how someone comes to that point so that you can recognize that progress in others. And
also, like, I think that there's a big distinction between the people who were in some way pushed to do that. Like the girl who was trafficked. There is a recent story of somebody who had been trafficked since she was like 13 or 14 and finally killed the person who was trafficking her. And now she's in jail for it. And it's that idea of like, what did it take to push to get to that is very different than I just want to kill somebody to get the feel of what it feels like to kill someone.
I think you're referring to the Crystal Kaiser case in Ohio, which has gotten a lot of, in Wisconsin, excuse me, which has gotten a lot of ink over the years. And that's an interesting case, to what extent does homicide become justifiable either in retribution for crimes or in self-defense? In this case, it was maybe a little bit of both.
Well, self-defense is always going to be kind of wishy-washy, especially when you live in certain states where they can just walk on your property and you can shoot them and justify it as self-defense. I mean...
Right. I mean, we've got a case in the news that I think we're going to talk about in a couple minutes here that, is being justified as self-defense where...
Mm-hmm.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do we want to close out true crime here? Do we have anything else we want to talk about with it?
Do you want to ask about favorite cases?
Yeah, give us a power ranking. Can you all each give us your top 3 cases?
Go ahead.
Power ranking is fair. I mean, it is NFL playoff season, and
I don't have power ranking. I have a hard time keeping track of names. I like the story, but I can say right now, just because it is so fresh, and 2020 actually just put out the most recent iteration of it, is the Markel Adelson case. Right now, that has been fascinating to me. And Court Junkie, also, if we're going to highlight some podcasts, Court Junkie is an amazing podcast that goes through different court cases. I don't know, Dee, if you've ever listened to that one, but that's a really good one, too.
I haven't listened to that one. I'll have to give it a listen. I just started listening to The Prosecutors, which is, it also is about true crime cases, and they're both former prosecutors, and so they're looking at it from, like, the storytelling from that perspective, which I thought was an interesting spin on it.
Uh-huh.
Ooh. Yeah, I guess there have been... Well, I already mentioned my Dyatlov Pass love, so that's probably my new obsession currently. But I also listened to a recent retelling of the Alyssa Lamb story. She was the one who was found in the water tank on top of the Cecil Hotel.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is also an unsolved one, which is just really interesting to me. Like, was that something that was totally self-induced, whether there be psychosis involved or not? Or was there assistance in getting her up in there? And so that would be an interesting one.
I always think of that one. So my assumption was always that she accidentally drowned, that she somehow got up onto the water tower and drowned in the water tank. But I always think of that one with the water coming out of the faucets for everybody. And I'm just like, oh, God, no. I'm walking into the ocean.
It's bad. But I always thought that she just drowned too, but like it's only an 18-inch by 18-inch hole that she needed to get into.
The hole.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So it's like a why?
And the video footage that they show of her being like super paranoid and peeking out of the elevator, like she looked like she was being chased. She looked terrified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she looked terrified, but then you find out like she did have mental health issues and may not have been taking her medications as prescribed, and so like, how much of that was internal, and if somebody is having a mental health crisis, could they possibly climb into a water tower thinking that it was something else? Sure, then it's a little more plausible.
Yeah,
but yeah. Gonna avoid the Cecil Hotel, whatever it is rebranded as right now, because it has been rebranded, but just to avoid that in general.
I think it's like a Home 2 now, that hotel chain. Nice place. You always want to be in. LA is great. It's the one city you don't want to go downtown in.
Yeah.
All right, D and J. Well, thank you so much for joining us for True Crime and for making a very good pitch for the value of the genre and why it's so interesting. I am certainly considering firing up some podcasts when the next time I hit a lull in my feed, because I think you made very good cases as to why we should all be interested in it. And it's really nice to get to meet the better halves of the two that we have spent so much time with over the past year. So thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. I promise I'm not trying to kill him. Just
everything
that I said on here. I swear I have given it zero thought. There's no planning.
Like I said, we wouldn't blame either of you.
So we're recording this podcast on Sunday, January 11th. And on Wednesday, January 7th, Renee Nicole Good, which is a name that you did not know at the start of the year and that you almost certainly know now, was murdered in Minneapolis by Jonathan Ross, an ICE firearms trainer. Was he ICE or CBP?
I thought he was ICE.
At this point, you've probably seen at least one of the several videos of the shooting. You've certainly heard about what the videos show, which is not a whole lot of reason for an ICE agent to shoot someone 3 times in the face. And at this point, this is clearly still a quickly moving story. It seems like the battle lines are pretty well drawn in terms of what the administration's approach to the story is and how people are reacting.
And if you haven't seen the video yet, you don't need to see the video.
You absolutely do not need to see the video.
Enough people have described this video. You do not need to be online all the time traumatizing yourself with pictures and videos. Something that I think really should be emphasized as much as possible nowadays.
Yep.
Yeah, you're not obligated to watch people die.
I think what the administration is saying with regards to this whole situation, their position will always be that federal law enforcement has a right to murder whoever they want, whenever they want. There's no recourse. There's nothing you can do to stop it. If they want to kill you, they have the right to do that, and you have no right to defend yourself. You have no right to avoid that. They can exercise the death penalty at their full discretion at all times. There is nothing else going on there. I think it's notable that the reporting around how the president behaved when he was shown the actual video was revealing. He did not immediately respond, "Oh, well, she's clearly trying to hit him with her car." He just described it as terrible and sort of went on into one of his little, short outs, right?
He didn't want to see it.
He didn't want to see it.
He saw it, and he didn't want to see it.
Yeah. This is a man who does not have a strong stomach for violence, regardless of his rhetoric. We know he does not have a strong stomach for violence and never has, right? That doesn't excuse anything. It's just a personal quality. It's an assessment of a personal quality. There are other people in this administration who are behind the wheel of the car to a much greater degree than the person who is occupying the Oval Office, who love violence. Love the idea of a woman being shot to death by federal law enforcement because she wouldn't comply with them, or because there was hypothetically a way they could make it into a threat to that law enforcement's physical safety. Stephen Miller is a good example of this kind of person, for sure. But the president himself doesn't have the stomach for it. That doesn't matter. That doesn't mean, this is not the czar is fine. It's his advisors that are the issue. No, the czar is the issue. But I do think that's important to say. I also want to point out that a lot of the people who you would expect to both sides of this thing are not doing so. Noah Smith, who we have talked about previously on this podcast and is all around just a bad guy. Do not like the man. Do not like his opinions. They're bad. They're poorly informed. He's racist. He's weird. Bad guy.
I think you should inform us why you think that, George.
I think I've told this story previously.
I don't know
I've
if
told
you
this
have
story
on the
previously
show.
on this podcast, but I went to a friend's going away party in the mid 2010s, and Noah Smith was invited. He introduced himself to me as, I'm Noah. Everyone follows me on Twitter. And he then proceeded to do karaoke. It was a rap song. It might have been Public Enemy. It was something like that, where hard R N word lyrics were dropped by Noah Smith, who you can, this guy's an economist with the name Noah Smith. He not of the kind of race where that would be okay for him to use. So, yeah.
An unmelanated man.
Yeah. He has a long Substack post out being like, oh yeah, no, this was completely unacceptable. Like, they murdered her.
Yeah.
Which Jake Tapper of CNN, very, very much of the belief that this was not okay in any way, shape, or form. Now, not everyone is taking that position. For instance, Bill Ackman, who is a gadfly from a political perspective, we've talked about him on the show previously, and portfolio manager, runs a hedge fund, has been involved in a variety of things related to the Trump administration and its intersection with financial markets, donated 5 figures to the GoFundMe designed to give a golden parachute to the ICE officer who murdered a woman in cold blood. So Bill Ackman is a horrible, awful person. He is scum. And I'm just going to really emphasize that because we're in the same industry. The guy is as bad as it comes. When you can't outperform Noah Smith of all people on this stuff, you are in a dark, dark place. So,
yeah, I think it's a real problem that the response from the right has not been, wow, this was an unfortunate accident. The response from the right, at least those portions of it that are still holding on this, has been, no, the cop acted exactly like he was supposed to act. This is correct law enforcement behavior for this offense. It's absolutely great that Renee Nicole Good was shot. And that seems to me to be such an extreme position that it's still early days on this, but it parses to me like error. That's not where the median American is. That's not even where the 75th percentile American is. Like, it's not just that they're making the argument, okay, well, the cop thought for a second that his life was in danger and that justifies a shoot. It's that, that even if there was the possibility that the cop's life was in danger, it's good that he shot. That there's no concession that maybe law enforcement should not be pulling the trigger immediately the minute they're scared. And there's more than a little bit, and this is coming out of the mouths of ICE agents after the shooting, of a sense that they would very, very much like to establish the principle that if you are protesting ICE, you are risking death.
Yep.
That if you are out there with a whistle, if you are out there getting in the way in any way, if you are out there using your constitutionally protected voice, they can kill you.
And that killing you is actually a positive good, like that's like a good thing.
Right. Exactly. That the fact of your protesting constitutes obstruction of justice, and that the penalty for that is summary death. And, this is a pretty big red flag for authoritarianism, right? Like this is a major stop on the train diagram for how you get to a police state, is not just to criminalize dissent, but to establish that your immediate death, your immediate injury, your immediate irrevocable pain in whatever way is part of the price that you must pay to dissent.
It's a really good way to get a lot of these people killed too. Not the protesters, I mean the police. Because if we get to the point where there is a general understanding that you can be killed for protesting, then there will be guns at protests. And regardless of the legality of that, we've talked about this in the past, but for instance, in North Carolina, I don't really ever feel uncomfortable protesting because I know that there's a statute barring guns at protests. I'm not worried about it popping off like that. But if you go extra legal on cracking down on protesting, then you will see people go extra legal on the other side. I'm not necessarily endorsing this. I'm not saying I would do this, but I can guarantee you that when you go down that path, then protesters will start shooting back. There are too many guns in this country and too many people who distrust a government that just goes out and shoots people in the street, as they should, for that to be avoided. And if we get to the point where federal law enforcement activity is responded to by crowds of people with guns opening up, there are going to be a lot of dead cops, a lot of them. There is not, so that's a really, really bad outcome for everybody involved, to be clear. Yeah, really bad outcome.
We do not want that. We do not want open war on the streets of America. That's
a great way to get a ulster.
Yeah. And the other thing too is if you look back historically at efforts to move forward gun control in this country, a lot of them were driven around police safety concerns, right? If you're a police officer and you have a legitimate fear that someone could open up on you at every traffic stop, maybe toning down the likelihood that happens is a good idea, right? And the alignment around gun control has shifted in this country to where that's no longer the case because the political valence of police officers is the same as NRA members, and there's ideological cross-pollination there. But from a strictly how do I do my job without getting murdered perspective, you want more gun control. You want some limits on who can have a gun, when they can have it, where they can have it, right? And they just have not thought any of this through. The other thing I will say is that this further reinforces the idea that these people think that the thermostatic public opinion shifts are completely irrelevant to them. They just don't need to worry about them. And that's not true.
Yeah.
It's just not. So from a accelerationist perspective, from an accelerationist perspective, I think you can make the pitch that the reaction to the Renee Good murder is actually a good thing for Democrats' electoral chances and for the ultimate fragility of this regime. I don't say that as in it was a price worth paying. I say that to say just from where we are now versus where we were a week ago, I suspect there are a large number of people in this country who are like, whoa, I'm not on board with this, right? And that probably wouldn't have been the case if they had said, no, this was a mistake. We expect more of our brave troops, and this guy's going to get more training and it won't happen from him again. I don't think you would see the same impact in opinion terms.
Yeah, you need to make them pay.
Right. I mean, it needs to be going.
That's a key thing.
It needs to be going through the mind of everyone who works for DHS that their behavior is going to be the subject of criminal action potentially in the future. That anything that they do right now, they may be held accountable for. That we know who they are. We being the U.S. government. That we will know who they are. Again, we being the U.S. government. And at such time as there is at such time as there are prosecutors that are not ideologically co-aligned with them, they will face the law. In the short term, they're going to face social sanctions. But the Trump administration is trying very, very hard to convince these guys that they're not going to face the law. And I don't think that's true. I don't think they're going to skate. I don't think they're going to skate forever. I don't think they're going to skate very long at all. I don't think that Trump in particular is constitutionally inclined to protecting his guys to the degree that he's going to need to protect his guys to maintain that mindset. He's going to decide to throw some guys under the bus. And if you work for DHS, you might be one of those guys. We'll see. I could be wrong. Maybe he and DOJ absolutely hold the line and they do whatever they can for as long as they can to protect anybody who is doing this from criminal consequences across the board. Even if they do, I think that there are state and local criminal consequences that can be brought to bear. And at some point, there are going to be, I don't mean this euphemistically, at some point there are going to be extrajudicial consequences. That doesn't mean somebody's going to shoot these guys, but that there's going to be social sanction that clicks in immediately. You know, these guys are already eating a lot of spit in their burritos, right? Like there's already scorn and opprobrium being directed at people who work for ICE by certainly the residents of the cities that they're policing, but increasingly by America as a whole. And this is going to be something, the stink of which will follow you around for the rest of your life. And therefore you may want to consider you may want to reconsider your participation in the enterprise.
Yeah, think long and hard. Because the law is coming, I think. 2029 is going to be here before you know it. And everybody, it's all on tape. And those personnel databases are there. We can sort this out in very short order. And I would not bet that I would certainly not bet that Donald Trump is going to be there to save you. Because as we all know, nobody loves to plant the knife in somebody's back like Trump. So, good luck, champ.
May Renee Nicole Good's memory be a blessing. And I just want to also add that a crowdfunding effort to provide for her family was extraordinarily successful, well over $1 million raised, to the point where, and this is really, I think, the difference between us and them. This is the difference. It was closed, and they said, we've got enough. Let's redirect this to other causes, because we appreciate it, but they're set now. They don't need more. Other people need it more. So if you really need to think about what the difference is, that's the difference. That reaction. Grace through death, grace in death, grace after death, grace in her memory, and may that memory be a blessing.
Amen.
Amen. So we got some international goings on as well this week that we should probably check in on. Might not be a big deal, might be a really big deal. We'll see. But
it was a fun Saturday night on the old Blue Sky app, that's for sure. Okay, so the Daily Mail reported that the Pentagon has been asked to provide plans to seize Greenland by military force. Now, with all due respect to Mike Black, friend of the podcast, Mike Black on Blue Sky, very well informed on national security stuff, excellent poster, A+, you should go follow him, who pointed out that the Daily Mail has been surprisingly well sourced on matters involving the Pentagon in the second Trump administration, and fair enough for him to point that out. I am not going to trust something this serious to the crack team at the Daily Mail. I need to hear it from other outlets, frankly. I need to hear it from anyone else, really. We also got a report separately, slightly late, I think it was about half an hour, 45 minutes later. I could have the timeline slightly messed up there, from the Telegram, saying that European, this is another...
Telegraph.
From the Telegraph. Thank you. You send a telegram on the Telegraph. Yeah. We got another report half an hour later, something like that, from the Telegraph, which is another European paper, another British paper specifically, but one that tends to have a slightly higher editorial standard in my long experience reading these outlets.
Yeah, to expand on that, so there's really 3 British papers worth talking about, the papers of record. There is the Times of London, which is the Tory paper. British papers are sort of explicitly partisan. There is the Guardian, which is the left paper, the Labour paper. And then there is the Financial Times, which is sort of the centrist-y, mushy paper. It's like the Wall Street Journal if the Wall Street Journal were not insane.
The Wall Street Journal with better editorials is I think, the way to describe it.
That's right.
Because the news sides of the Wall Street Journal does a great job. Anyhow.
Yes, that's correct. The Telegraph is sort of half a step below those 3.
Yep.
So not completely disreputable, but not on the level of those three, but not the Daily Mail.
No, the Daily Mail is not credible. So I'm again, all due respect to Mike Black, but I really disagree with him on this. So the Telegraph report basically said that European leadership is evaluating responses to an American incursion into Greenland, and that will take the form of sanctions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So from my perspective, I think that the Telegraph story was much more important because that's a more reputable outlet, and it's very clearly planted from the European side as opposed to somebody with a wild hair up their ass on the American side. And yeah, so either way, this represents a pretty serious escalation. Either if Europe believes that this is a realistic outcome, or if there actually is planning going on the American side, take either story as reported as you want. Now, I will say two things. First, we have not got follow-ups from anyone major as of this recording. It's about almost 3 p.m. on Sunday. Haven't gotten any major follow-ups from anyone about either of these stories, which leads me to believe that probably not the real deal. Second thing, markets didn't move on either of the headlines. Thin weekend liquidity. If someone actually took a look at this story and said, I want to put some money behind this, you would see moves in Bitcoin, and you didn't see anything. Futures open in a few hours, so maybe things will change then, but I doubt it. So for now, the money that be is not particularly interested in putting a lot of weight behind this concept. What I will say is if the US invades Greenland, it's going to be really bad. That's my professional opinion on that. I still think the odds are very low, but it's not going to be good. There's a scene
That's a bold take, George.
Yeah, there's a scene in Snatch, which is a Guy Ritchie boxing / London gangster movie from the early 2000s, late 90s,
One
early
of the
2000s.
truly great movies.
Yeah, just a great Brad Pitt just doing Brad Pitt things.
Yep.
Fantastic. So, some amazing accents, just really fun pacing. It's great. It's great.
To be clear, Guy Ritchie London crime / boxing narrows it down to Guy Ritchie's entire filmography.
Well, no, because there's the Guy Ritchie. Hold on. That's not true. There's the Guy Ritchie London crime / drugs. There's Guy Ritchie London crime / rock and roll. There's Guy Ritchie London crime / boxing. There's Guy Ritchie London. I mean, there are subgenres here to work with.
What
Anyhow,
I like about it is that he's still doing these London underground movies in like the 2020s when London has long since been gentrified.
Oh yeah.
and there's no freaking underground anymore, right?
No.
Yeah. I mean, like I love it because they're basically Britsploitation movies, right? Like
yeah.
this is 70s blaxploitation, except we're recasting it. Anyway,
so there's a great line from a Guy Ritchie movie where one of the characters is robbing a bookie location, like an underground bookie, which again doesn't really make sense anymore because you can just do all your betting online for anything, regardless of the legality. It's a bookie taking bets on an underground boxing match, and he comes in and he's pointing the shotgun at the teller, and he's like, "Give me your money!" And the teller just looks at him, and it's this very well cast woman with the shaved head.
It's no fucking money, isn't it?
All bets are off. I'm not here to place a fucking bet. All bets are off. So I really like, we're in a place where there are possible outcomes that involve a complete breakdown of things that people have assumed will be true forever because they are so foundational that assuming they are not true means everything collapses. That's the level that the US invading Greenland is on. Right?
Yeah.
You are entering a world where you can't do transatlantic shipping anymore, where you can't do transatlantic wire movements, like movements of capital, where American businesses can't operate in Europe and vice versa. Our economy, our financial markets, our global system of allocating resources is by several orders of magnitude more complex than anything that has come before it that was tested by some sort of major conflagration. The global economy, as we entered the Second World War, was so much more simply organized and so much less, the value chains were so much shorter. The steps from taking something out of the ground or out of the water or whatever, out of the field to its consumption were so much shorter at that time, right? The stuff we were building at that point in time, whether it's take a car today and compare it to a car then, or take medical technology and compare it to medical technology then, whatever, it doesn't matter. So much simpler. Economic complexity has exploded. And that's what economic growth is. It's increasing complexity. That system cannot continue in a world that doesn't have a American military that does not just go out and take whatever it wants.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, one of the second order consequences of reducing back to essentially great power spheres, which is something that it looks like at least the Trump administration is maybe interested in doing, where, you have military powers that have their spheres of influence and kind of separate empires, is that everything out on the periphery becomes a free-for-all because the great powers are occupied. They're busy. You can't prevent a conflagration between lesser powers if you're tied down doing imperial things. You can go try to incorporate one of the lesser powers that are fighting into the empire. You can expand empires that way and reduce conflict that way. But you lose the ability to do things like mediate regional wars that you're not a part of if you are reducing back to a imperial great powers mindset. And that has lots of consequences in terms of trade. It means that everything is siloed within an imperial vertical, for the most part, that you have maybe a couple of places where you have exchange between empires, but substantially, like, you're running things through a very limited number of economies that are functioning as autarkies.
We've already been through decolonialization. We're not going back to great powers. Like, these folks have all read Mao. They all understand Vietnam. They all understand guerrilla warfare. We're not going back to a place, unless you're just willing to nuke everybody, but I don't think Trump is willing to do that. We're not going back to a place where we're going to rule over this sphere of influence, and Russia is going to rule over this sphere of influence, and China and maybe India, I don't know. That race done been run. We're in a different world now, and it's a world that we as a country built for good reason. And so it's striking to me that we have this 19th century mindset among all of these morons in the Trump administration, not just with this great powers play, but also with, these guys sit online all day stewing in the filth, and they're talking about IQ, and they're talking about race science, quote unquote race science, all this stuff. These guys are all just so backwards. We've been down this road. We've moved past this. Human knowledge has moved past this. Science has moved past this. Sociology and political science have moved past this. This is wildly stupid.
I don't think it's really hard to understand the president's motivations around this. Like, he wants to have a big addition to the map because the Mercator projection is stupid. And just for, if you don't know what the Mercator projection is, basically it's hard to convert a sphere onto a flat rectangular shape, right? You have to change the relationships between points, and the classic map you're familiar with of the world is done via what's called the Mercator projection, which basically overstates the size of northern hemisphere landmass. So Greenland looks enormous when it's not. I mean, it's a big place, but like it's not as big as it looks on the map, right? And the reason for that is because it's up near the pole, and you have to you have to expand the distance between given data points to make them equivalent to down on the equator because sphere to rectangle. Okay, great. So he wants to put his stamp on the American map because he's about to die. He thinks he's about to die anyways. Okay, fine. But the problem here is not that dumb thing because that's manageable, right? Like his various viziers could be managing that by saying, well, sir, for whatever reason, this isn't, come on, what are we doing here? Ignore this guy. Leaking to the press, for instance, like we are absolutely not investigating military actions to seize Greenland or something like that. That's not what we're getting. The problem is that these people actually think this way. It's the same thing as the point I made about the ICE murder in the last segment. It's the exact same dynamic.
So I think what's happening here is essentially that there are two different bluffs that are happening here. Bluff number one is that Trump doesn't want to take military action to take Greenland, but he wants Greenland very much. He wants to be able to buy Greenland. He wants Denmark to sell him Greenland at, whatever price. He wants that to be a nominally peaceful territorial expansion by the U.S. that is enabled by the threat of military force. So, he wants it to be coercive, but he doesn't actually want war. So the bluff on the American side is we are willing to take Greenland by force, and this will be terrible for everyone if we do, but we're going to do it anyway. So you should sell it to us, and then that'll remove the issue. And I think that the EU, I'm less sure that this is 100% a bluff, but what they're now saying, what they're starting to say is that these are the consequences if you were to take Greenland by force. Therefore, Denmark, you don't need to sell Greenland because this threat of force that is underlying, the whole conceit of a sale is not a real threat because we are going to make life very, very unpleasant for everyone if the United States were to invade Greenland. My concern is that these guys are idiots.
Do we think they would actually...
Do I think that the wise heads of the EU would actually pull the trigger on maximal economic sanctions against the United States? I think they probably wouldn't, but I think that they probably would do some things that would reduce everyone's quality of life by quite a bit.
I want to make a key point here. The system is much more vulnerable than it looks. Right?
Yeah.
Like you don't actually have to do that much to really mess with the quality and the standard of living in the entire world. Now, the Europeans are well enough briefed that they understand how that works. The problem is the Americans aren't. The principals are not smart enough to know where the line is.
Right.
Does that mean they'll cross it? No. But it sure raises the odds.
Yeah.
Right? Europe could absolutely wreck our whole day if they really wanted to. And the question is going to be, do they really want to? I would be really, really cautious taking the lessons of the 2010s, which were basically about can kicking, about deciding who pays the bill for Europe's own internal allocation of resources, about relative advantage from one country within Europe to the next, and applying them to a dynamic that has changed radically. Germany is doing very expansionary fiscal policy for the first time since reunification. Germany is also facing an existential threat of competition from Chinese manufacturing. Europe has basically weaned itself off of natural gas to a degree that nobody thought was possible prior to the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the 2021 invasion of Ukraine by Russia. February 2022, right? Yes.
Yes.
That's right.
Prior to the February 2022 invasion of Ukraine by Russia. An external threat and an internal competition are two wildly different things. And I would be very cautious betting that Europe will have no spine for standing up for its interests collectively against an external threat in a way that they were incapable of doing against internal problems.
Who seizes the reins, though? Like, what is the leadership of the EU. Like I
don't think you need a single person or a single state to seize the reins. That's the thing. I mean, there are so many collective decision-making processes already set up.
You do have to, right, collective decision-making processes. And the Europeans sit around twiddling their thumbs and having meetings about meetings.
Again, I don't doubt that the Europeans would respond. To what degree, though? If American troops invade Greenland and start killing Danish citizens, which is if there is an American invasion of Greenland, it's a high probability that Danish citizens are going to be killed by American troops. It's in some context. I'm not saying
going to die as a result of the invasion. I mean, like,
sure.
One of the other things here is that Greenland is an extremely hostile place to live. Like that's still the other factor here is that, people can see where the puck is going on things like climate change. And there's a future where Greenland is more habitable and more attractive for lots of purposes because it's warmer. But right now, Greenland sucks. There's a reason nobody lives in Greenland except for 50,000 people. That it's substantially unpopulated landmass is because it's extremely remote and extremely hostile to human life. There are other places like this that also don't have a lot of people because they're extremely remote and extremely cold. And despite the fact that they're near significant natural resources, they're not very populated because it's still hard for us to do things like set up big cities in places that are extremely remote and extremely hostile.
Yeah, because nobody wants to fucking live there.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it's entirely dependent on shipping, and the shipping is entirely dependent on navigating around ice. Like, there's ice all the frickin' time.
Imagine the Jones Act, but with icebergs.
So, like, if there is significant disruption to Greenland, people will suffer. People will die because it is not a place that can sustain itself. It is. There may theoretically be some way to configure Greenland so that it is a place that can sustain itself without regular shipments from the people who have been shipping things to it, but it is definitely not configured that way right now. It is configured to be a remote outpost of empire is too grand a way to say it, but it is configured to be a remote outpost of civilization that is serviced by faraway civilizations, that is serviced by the core.
I have real doubts about the Europeans. Just because my whole impression of the Europeans is that they sit around and meetings about meetings. I can see sanctions coming. Are the Europeans actually going to put their fucking guns up and shoot back?
Well, that's the thing. They don't have to put up guns. There are many, many other ways to do this.
No. But that could still get us there. And then all of these guys learn their lesson of, they actually could melt down our entire economy.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think there's lots of ways. And the other thing about the economic sanctions is that, like, once you introduce these as a live possibility, that has to become part of everybody's future planning. Like, we've seen that a little bit in reference to the United States economy and closing things down, that, like, firms are now assessing U.S. risk in a different way than they did previously, U.S. political risk. I don't think that's fully percolated yet, but, like, that's a big change from 5-10 years ago, where, you would have said, okay, well, the United States is a premium market and has negligible political risk that we have to worry about. Now there's political risk that you have to worry about. That's showing up as a term in the spreadsheets. So
they don't use spreadsheets, Proctor. These are real companies. They use databases.
Everybody uses spreadsheets.
They use spreadsheets, dude. No.
Like,
is there a finance function? It's in a spreadsheet.
Oh, you Excel people, Jesus.
I mean,
Look, no one's happy about it. It's just how it is.
yeah. It's
You can't teach MBAs to do SQL queries. This is not possible. It's not possible.
It's like how we wound up with English as the language of trade, you know? Like it's not necessarily true that this is what you would do in an ideal situation. It's not like anybody planned this necessarily, but here we are and we're stuck with it forever. So
yeah. The global business plot is in this house. We believe in free movement of capital, the English language, double entry bookkeeping, high stock price multiples, and Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah. That's the creed.
You go, girl.
That seems as good of a stopping point as any for this episode of Normal Men. Ed will be back next week, and we were really happy to have some ladies of the podcast make their opening appearances. I hope they'll be back for something at some point, I'm assuming.
Normal wives, if you will.
Yeah, it was great to have
That's
them
right.
on. And as always, I really enjoyed hanging out with my friends Proctor and Lotax, and I feel a lot better now than I did last night, and that's part of why we do this podcast, and we hope you were able to laugh along with us a little bit as we talked about some of the worst stuff in the world. So, for Normal Men in Charlotte, I'm George.
Self-soothing in DC, this is Proctor.
In outer Florida, I am Lotax Speedrun-Enjoyer.
Stay normal, y'all.